3 hours I spent in that kitchen, sweating over one dish like it was the Super Bowl of anniversaries. Chicken masala browned golden, asparagus crisp on the bite, wine bottle breathing at just the right temp. Candles lined our little dining table, flames trembling like they knew the pressure was on. Music low, just some old-school cuts humming through the speakers, enough to warm the walls of a modest southwest Atlanta townhouse. I told myself this was how you keep love alive: effort, patience, showing up when nobody asked. My hands still smelled like sawdust from the job site, but I scrubbed them twice and put on a clean shirt. Tonight was supposed to remind her of us, remind her that under the bills, the schedules, the late nights, we still had something worth lighting candles for. The door didn't open. It exploded. Monet, my wife of 7 years, burst in at 8:30 sharp, not alone but flanked like a queen coming back from war. On her left, Tanisha, the hype woman who could turn any moment into mockery. On her right, Portia, already holding her phone at that angle, camera light glinting like judgment. They spilled into the room laughing, perfume and street noise crashing into my carefully built quiet. "Oh my god, Ja," Moni said, eyes cutting across the table like she was inspecting crime scene evidence. "What is this?" I swallowed. "Anniversary dinner." Tanisha laughed, high and sharp. "Boy, you really set the whole vibe. Like, who still does this?" Portia raised her phone, aiming for the candles. My voice came out calm, firmer than I felt. "Put it down." For once she listened, rolling her eyes but lowering the lens. Moni stepped closer, hair laid, heels clicking on tile, face lit by candlelight like she was on stage. "You cooked chicken?" she asked, dragging out the word like it tasted sour. She leaned in to sniff, then smiled without warmth. Smells like desperation." The laughter hit again, bouncing off my walls, bouncing off my ribs, but something inside me didn't crack. It settled. Heavy, steady, like water finally deciding to turn into ice. I looked at the candles, reached for the first one breath, flame gone, another. Darkness deepened. By the third, their giggles thinned. By the fifth, the silence was a weight on all of us. "You're right, Monet," I said softly, steady as stone. "This is too much. This is over." The smile on her face faltered. For the first time all night, I saw confusion slip through her makeup. "Over what? Dinner?" "No," I said, grabbing my jacket from the hook. "Us." Keys in my pocket, boots on the floor. I walked to the door, each step quieter than their silence. The October night air hit me cool, clean, like a baptism. Behind me, Monet's voice cracked just a little. "Jahari, where you going?" I didn't stop. "Booker's," I said. 15 minutes down Joseph E. Lowry. A neon sign half burned out. A bar that don't judge you when you walk in smelling like sweat and heartbreak. Tonight, I stopped being her husband. Tonight I became something else entirely. Booker's wasn't the kind of place you dressed up for. Neon over the door buzzed and stuttered like an old preacher losing his voice. The E long gone, so the sign just read Booker's, which always felt right. Inside, the air was a mix of fryer oil, bleach, and blues that lived in the speakers no matter what song was playing. A couple of regulars hunched over the bar, same seats as yesterday, probably same thoughts too. I slid onto my usual stool like I'd been coming every Tuesday night of my life, even though this was the first Tuesday I'd ever needed it. Lennox Booker, Len to everyone who mattered, stood behind the bar, polishing a glass that didn't need polishing. 61, beard gone silver grey, eyes sharp as the whiskey he poured. He looked at me and tilted his head, reading me the way only men who've seen too many stories can. "Well, look who the storm blew in," he said, voice low and rough. "On your anniversary night too, ain't that supposed to mean something?" I gave a humourless smile. It meant something to me. Len set down the glass, leaned on the counter. "Let me tell you something, Ya. Love don't end when the flowers stop blooming. It ends when the watering does. Ain't the romance that dies first, it's the care." He let the words hang in the stale bar air like cigar smoke. "And once that's gone, you're just roommates with matching bills." He slid me a bourbon without asking, 2 fingers more generous than I'd have poured myself. I raised it in a silent toast before it even touched my lips. The door creaked open, and half the bar shifted just from the size of the man who walked in. Marlon Marl Pruitt, big frame, boots that sounded like construction hammers when they hit the wood floor. He'd been my right hand on job sites for years, man who could lift a beam solo and still crack jokes while doing it. He spotted me, cracked that half smile that said, "I knew I'd find you here." He eased down onto the stool beside me, ordered a beer with just a nod. "Well, damn," he said, shaking his head. 7 years, and you in here with me on a Tuesday. That don't sound like romance, Ja. That sounds like survival." I took a sip, let the burn steady me. Survival feels about right. Marl leaned his big elbows on the counter, studying my face the way he studied blueprints. "Whatever you need, I'm here. No questions, no conditions." I didn't answer right away, just nodded, because words felt too heavy. That's when my phone buzzed. Then again, then again. The sound was sharp in the quiet lull of the bar, like a fly trapped in a glass. I didn't need to flip it to know the name lighting up the screen. Monet. Call, then text, then another, each one more frantic than the last, I was sure. Len glanced at the phone, then at me. "You going to pick that up?" I set it face down on the counter. "Nope." Silence, except the hum of the cooler and a faraway laugh from one of the old-timers playing cards. I took another sip, let the phone buzz itself into the floor, then suddenly a new buzz, different rhythm. I glanced down. A text had popped up, only it wasn't meant for me. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Same hotel, same call. XOXO." I froze, the glass halfway to my lips. The message glowed on my screen, sweet and slick, but I recognized it instantly. It was meant for her. Somehow, in her rush to text her secret, Monet had grabbed the wrong phone earlier, which meant... I looked at my screen, then at Marl. He caught the shift in my expression, leaned in. "What is it?" I turned the phone so he could read it. His eyebrows shot up. "Damn, my Justos. She really sent that to you." "Not to me," I said, voice flat. "From her. She picked up the wrong phone." The realization settled in my chest like a brick hitting water. Her phone was sitting back in our house, wide open, full of secrets she never thought I'd see. I set my glass down slow, steady. My voice was quiet, but it carried all the way to the end of the bar. Her phone is at home, and now I suddenly feel like reading. By the time I walked back into that townhouse, the candles I'd lit earlier were just puddles of wax, bent and broken like the night itself. The place smelled faintly of garlic and wine sauce, reminders of a dinner that never even got tasted. Monet was there, waiting in the living room like she was on a stage. Perfect posture, perfect makeup, perfect mask. "You just left," she said, tone rehearsed, chin high. "You embarrassed me in front of my friends. You think that's cute?" I didn't answer. I just let my boots carry me through the living room, past her sharp words, into the kitchen. And there it was, her purse on the counter, open like it was waiting for me. Inside, glowing with the dumb confidence of a secret keeper, sat her phone. I picked it up. It didn't even need a passcode. I knew the pattern. She never thought I'd have reason to check. My thumb moved without hesitation, and her world unfolded in my hand. First thing that hit me, photos. Not of us, not of family, but of her and him, Brennan March. Selfies in cars, hotel mirrors, his expensive suit hanging loose on her shoulder. Then the texts, paragraphs of them, jokes about me, cruel laughter about my cooking, about my flannel shirts, about how pathetic it was that I still tried. Every line was like a small cut, but I didn't bleed. Not anymore. Then came the logistics. Hotel confirmations, restaurant receipts, Uber screenshots, every detail of their little double life documented with timestamps and emojis. And deeper in the thread, the real rot. Brennan giving her advice on how to shift money. Keep a separate account, move little bits, he won't notice. Don't tell him about your raise, stash it for when you're ready to bounce. Receipts don't lie. Bank transfers, confirmation numbers, addresses. My chest felt heavy, but not from heartbreak. This was evidence. This was proof. I opened my own phone, started taking screenshots. Every picture, every message, every plan. Sent them straight to my cloud drive, locked under a password only I knew. With each upload, I felt the ground under my feet get firmer. It wasn't just emotion anymore. It was fact. Then I saw it. The next move in their playbook. A fresh message from Brennan, shining bold at the top of the thread. Riverside Suites, 4:30, tomorrow, can't wait. I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. Tomorrow, 4:30, the hotel on Riverside I knew too well, the one folks around here used when they didn't want to be recognized. From the living room, Monet's voice floated in, still steady, still pretending nothing was wrong. "You gonna ignore me all night?" I walked back into the doorway, phone in hand. She didn't even flinch, kept her arms folded like she was untouchable. But inside I already knew. The mask wouldn't matter anymore. The truth was sitting in my pocket, in my cloud, in her own careless words. I looked at the door, then at the street outside, picked up my other phone, dialed Marl. "Tomorrow," I said when he answered. My voice was calm, cold, certain. "We need a camera and patience." Morning came grey and heavy, like even the sky knew something dirty was about to happen. Marl picked me up in his truck just after lunch, camera bag tossed in the back like it was just another tool for the job. He didn't ask questions. He never did when I had that look, but he kept glancing at me the way a man checks the weather before pouring concrete. We drove across town, past the rows of shotgun houses and corner stores, into that polished part of the city where folks pretended they lived in Buckhead, even though it was just downtown, dressed up with coffee shops and overpriced lofts. Brennan March's office sat inside one of those old warehouses they'd converted. Brick facade, shiny windows, fresh paint trying too hard to look authentic. "Silver Beamer," Marl muttered, pointing his chin as we rolled past. Parked right out front like a trophy reflecting the weak sun. The car was spotless, polished until you could see your sins in it. And Brennan himself stepped out a few minutes later, tailored suit, phone glued to his ear, smiling that too easy smile, the kind of smile men wear when they think the rules don't apply to them. We set up across the street, cameras angled just enough to see the lot but not draw eyes. Marl handled the shots. He'd done enough hunting to know how to stay still when it counted. I just sat there, watching Brennan strut between his office and the car, pacing like he owned not just the building but the whole damn block. Then, just after 2, a red Honda Civic pulled in. My breath hitched even before the driver stepped out. It was his wife, Jean March. She looked like she'd have come straight from showing a house. Slim black blazer, heels clicking across the pavement, a folder under her arm. She moved with the kind of energy that said she had no idea her world was already cracked. And Brennan? He walked right up to her, kissed her cheek, wrapped her in a hug broad daylight couldn't hide. "Damn," Marl whispered, adjusting the lens. "If that ain't cold." I watched, jaw tight, as Brennan smiled down at her, hand at the small of her back, playing husband of the year. He wasn't trapped, wasn't scared. He was doubling down. To him, Jean wasn't someone to protect or respect. She was cover, a prop in his little play. The Civic pulled away after a few minutes, Jean waving out the window like she was leaving her man to get back to his grind. Brennan turned, phone buzzing again, and for a second his whole mask cracked. He glanced at his watch, smirked, and headed back inside. 4:30, I said under my breath. Marl glanced at me. "That's hotel time?" I nodded. "Riverside Suites." We waited. Hours passed slow, the kind of slow where every sound in the truck felt too loud. Ice rattling in Marl's cup, the click of the camera shutter, the scratch of my own breath. Then at 4:25 sharp, a familiar car pulled into the Riverside lot. Monet. She stepped out in a dress I'd bought her for her birthday last year. Blue that hugged every curve. She looked polished, deliberate, like she was walking into an audition she knew she'd win. My stomach turned, not from jealousy but from the twisted irony. My gift, her costume for betrayal. At 4:30 on the dot, the silver BMW eased in. Brennan climbed out, same smug swagger, same too bright smile. And right there in that parking lot, no shame, no hesitation, he wrapped his arms around my wife, kissed her like she was his, like daylight didn't matter. Then together, hand in hand, they walked straight into the Riverside Suites lobby. Marl's camera clicked, timestamp glowing on the screen. Entry shots, angles, proof no one could spin away. He didn't speak, just kept working, face hard as the asphalt under us. I leaned back in the seat, every part of me gone quiet. This wasn't suspicion anymore, wasn't doubt. It was fact carved into pixels and minutes. And as I watched the glass doors close behind them, I knew one thing clear as day. Brennan March wasn't a victim of some mistake. He wasn't caught up in something bigger than him. He was a man choosing, laughing, performing like the whole damn world was his stage. I turned to Marl, voice steady, almost calm. "These shots," I said, "ain't for me. They're for someone who really needs to see them." By the next morning, I'd had enough bourbon and silence to know this wasn't just about me anymore. My pride was bruised, sure, but what sat heavier was the knowledge that somebody else was being played for a fool in broad daylight. Jean March. She wasn't just collateral in Brennan's games, she was a wife, a partner, a woman being lied to, with the same arrogance he'd shown me in that Riverside parking lot. I sat at my kitchen table, Monet's phone open in front of me like a confession booth. I scrolled through the receipts again. Hotel reservations, restaurant garages, cash app transfers. The math was simple, even brutal. It wasn't just love he was stealing, it was money, security, respect. And I figured Jean had the right to know exactly what kind of man her husband really was. So I dialed. Her business number picked up on the second ring. "This is Jean March, Keller Realty." Her voice was smooth, professional, the kind of voice that made you believe her when she said a house was a dream property. "Mrs. March," I said evenly, "my name's Johari Cole. I think you and I need to have a conversation about Brennan." Silence, a breath sharp on the other end. "Excuse me?" "I'm not calling to threaten you. Not looking for money, not trying to embarrass you. But I think you deserve to see what I've seen. I'm the husband of the woman your husband's been seeing, and I got receipts." Her tone shifted, harder now, layered with disbelief. "You better not be some troll playing on my phone." "I'm not. Check your email in 10 minutes. You'll see everything. No nudes, no bedroom talk, I cut all that out. But enough to show you the truth. Timestamps, hotel records, pictures, money trails. You'll see what he's been doing with my wife." I could hear her steadying her breath, could almost picture her pacing in some staged open house kitchen. "Send it," she said finally. I hung up, compiled the package, screenshots of texts clipped carefully to leave out what nobody else needed to read. Photos of the Riverside entrance with Monet and Brennan walking hand in hand, credit card charges stacked like dominoes, a timeline of nights and excuses side by side. By the time I finished, it looked more like a case file than a heartbreak. I attached it all, hit send, and sat back in my chair. A few hours later, I was back at Booker's. The same neon buzzed, the same smell of fried wings lingered in the air. Len slid me a glass before I even opened my mouth. "You look like a man halfway between peace and war," he said. "Something like that." He leaned across the bar, eyes heavy with experience. "Listen, Yar, don't do nothing you can't sleep through later. Ain't about revenge, it's about rest. You hear me?" "I hear you." But before I could answer more, my phone buzzed. This time not Monet, it was Jean. Short message, direct as a bullet. "I saw. I believe you. Meet me tomorrow. I'm bringing my lawyer." I read it twice, then slid the phone across the bar so Len could see. His brows lifted, but he didn't smile. He just muttered, "Well, hell. Looks like the truth's got legs." I drained the glass, set it down with a hard clink. My chest felt steadier than it had in weeks. "Tomorrow," I said, more to myself than anyone else. "Tomorrow, Brennan March is going to have a bad day." The next day, Marl and I parked across the street from Hale Innovations, the polished brick and glass loft Brennan liked to parade, as proof he was more than just a hustler in a suit. But today, his shiny little world was about to start cracking. We didn't even have to wait long. At exactly 11, a black sedan pulled into the lot. Out stepped Jean March, heels clicking sharp against the pavement, flanked by a man carrying a leather briefcase. Her lawyer. She wasn't here for a talk. She was here for war. They went inside, and not 2 minutes later, the whole building seemed to come alive. Voices rose, muffled at first, then boiling over loud enough for the entire block to catch. Through the wide office windows, we could see them, Jean with her folder of evidence, the lawyer cool and calm, and Brennan pacing like a caged animal. His hands flailed, his voice carried, his face red. Jean's voice cut through sharper. "You humiliated me. You stole from me. You think I wouldn't find out?" The sound poured into the street, bouncing off brick and concrete. People stopped on the sidewalk. A delivery guy leaned on his cart. 2 women carrying grocery bags paused mid-step. The whole neighborhood leaned in to watch the fire. And that's when I saw her. Tanisha, walking up fast, eyes locked on me like I was the match that lit this blaze. She didn't even say hello. She just jabbed a finger at my chest. "You did this. You ruined her life, Johari. You set her up." Before I could answer, a familiar voice cut in from behind us. Miss Eloise, my 70-year-old neighbour, was leaning on her cane, eyes squinting with all the wisdom this block had ever seen. "Child," she said evenly, "ain't nobody set your friend up but herself. Don't blame the man for pulling the curtain back. If you don't want a scene, don't put on a show in the first place. Tanisha's mouth opened, but no sound came. Eloise turned away, slow and steady, as if that settled it. And maybe it did. Across the street, the office doors burst open. Brennan stormed out, shirt rumpled, tie hanging loose. Jean was right behind him, her lawyer keeping pace, her voice raised enough for the pigeons on the power lines to scatter. You think you can hide money from me? You think I won't burn it all down before I let you play me like this? Her words hit like hammers, and Brennan's swagger cracked right there on the pavement. Phones were out everywhere, and there, front row as always, stood Portia. Only this time her camera wasn't tilted in Moni's favour. She wasn't laughing at me. She was filming the neighbourhood's newest soap opera, because even she knew where the story was now. The crowd buzzed. Whispers turned to commentary, commentary to judgment. And what spread faster than fire on a dry block? Facts. Not rumours, not suspicions, receipts, photos, voices raised in daylight. By the time Jean pulled away in her red Civic, Brennan's empire looked less like a business and more like a burned-out shell. He stood in the lot, face pale, hands on his knees, surrounded by the weight of everyone finally seeing who he really was. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For a second I thought it might be Marl's laugh ready to break the tension, but no. It was Monet. Meet me at 7 Coco. We need to talk. I stared at the message, felt the heat of the block still ringing in my ears. Need to talk? Fine. If she needed, then she was going to get it. By the time 7 o'clock rolled around, the house felt like a crime scene scrubbed too clean. The wax from those ruined anniversary candles still clung to the table, hardened streaks I hadn't bothered to scrape away. I sat there waiting, the overhead light buzzing faintly, my coffee mug cold in my hands. The key turned in the lock like she never left. Monet stepped inside, heels clicking on the hardwood, face painted soft as if makeup could erase months of betrayal. She hesitated when she saw me at the kitchen table, then squared her shoulders and came closer. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, voice low, almost trembling. I didn't answer right away. I just pointed at the chair across from me. She sat, folding her hands like a student waiting for an exam. "How long?" I asked. Her eyes darted, but this time she didn't give me the usual song and dance. 6 months, she whispered. "Since when?" "Last spring. Started with text messages, then more. Were you planning to leave me for him?" She looked at the table, at the wax stains, anywhere but my eyes. "Yes." For the first time in months, I felt no anger, no fire, just the solid weight of truth settling in the room. I leaned back, folded my arms. "Here's how this goes. You pack your things tonight. Tomorrow the lawyers start their work. After that, you and me, we go silent. Forever. No fights, no begging, no drama. Just clean lines." Tears brimmed in her eyes, rolling down the mask she'd spent years perfecting. "I don't want it to end like this, Johari." "It already ended. This is just paperwork." She shook her head, hands trembling now. "It's not just me and Brennan. You don't understand. She stopped herself, swallowed hard, but the words pushed through anyway. "We were planning things. Real things." I narrowed my eyes. What kind of things? She pressed her lips together, then exhaled. "Money. Hiding money. Brennan told me how to shift assets, how to keep accounts off your radar. We were going to start fresh once we both divorced. He said it was smart, strategic, said I deserved better than building a life off a construction worker's paycheck." The silence that followed was thick, heavy, choking. I stared at her, really seeing her, and the weight of what she'd confessed landed harder than any hotel receipt ever could. "You weren't just cheating," I said finally, my voice steady, cold. "You were plotting, using my money like it was a down payment on your next life." Her face crumpled, but I didn't move to comfort her. Not this time. She'd built this fire herself, and now she was choking on the smoke. The next evening found me back at Booker's. Same stool, same bourbon, same hum of neon outside buzzing like a fly that refused to die. Mar wasn't with me this time. This wasn't his fight. This was mine. Len was polishing glasses again, though none of them ever looked cleaner for it, and the jukebox was spinning some tired blues track about a man who stayed too long with the wrong woman. I almost laughed at the irony. The door creaked, and in walked Brennan March. No BMW shine today, no smug grin. His suit was wrinkled, hair a mess, face drawn like the day had been gnawing at him since sunrise. Still, he tried to walk in like he owned the place, like the floorboards bowed just for him. "Jahari," he said, spotting me. He even stretched out his hand, as though we were long-lost friends finally making peace. I just stared at it until his arm dropped back to his side. "Let's talk," he said, sliding onto the stool next to me uninvited. His cologne was too sharp, covering something sour underneath. Panic, maybe? "Talk," I repeated flatly. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Look, man, I get it. You're angry, anybody would be. But we don't have to drag this through the mud. Let's make a deal. I can make this worth your while." I let the words hang between us like spoiled meat. "Money?" "Yeah, money. Cash, wire, whatever you want. Just say the number. Everybody walks away clean." That's when I finally turned and looked him square in the eyes. "This was never about money, Brennan. It's about consequences. You thought you could lie, steal, cheat, and nobody would call you on it. That stops tonight." His jaw tightened, his knuckles tapping against the bar. "You think you're some hero. You're just bitter because you couldn't keep your wife happy." Len's voice came from behind the counter, calm but heavy as stone. "Gentlemen," he said, nodding up toward the corner of the ceiling. "Cameras see and hear everything in here, just so we're all clear." Brennan stiffened, glanced at the black dome tucked against the ceiling, tried to brush it off with a weak laugh, but the sweat on his temple gave him away. He took a long breath, then muttered low, like he couldn't help himself. "Damn it! I told her we should have moved the accounts earlier, should have buried the cash before Jean got wind. Now that lawyer of hers is going to eat me alive." The words tumbled out fast, panicked. Too fast and too loud. I didn't even need to look at Len. I knew the red light on that camera was blinking, storing every syllable. I stood, tossed a bill on the bar for my drink. Brennan stared at me, confused, like he couldn't tell whether he'd just won or lost something. I leaned close, just enough for him to hear. "Check your accounts, Brennan, Jean's lawyers. They got a love for arithmetic, and they're about to do the kind of math that leaves you broke." Then I walked out into the night, letting the door slam shut behind me, the sound ringing like the final gavel in a courtroom yet to come. By noon the block was buzzing, but the loudest thing I heard was Jean's voice on the phone. Steady, clip, all business. "We got an emergency injunction," she said. "Judge froze everything, personal and business. Your screenshots helped. We traced a path, company funds to Brennan's personal, then to gifts, boutique charges, jewelry, hotel upgrades, all tied to Monet. It didn't hit like jealousy, it hit like math, an ugly equation that they always balanced the same way. Company. Personal, money, not passion, accounting." 15 minutes later, Detective Alia Morton called. Her tone was respectful, tired like she'd seen this pattern 100 times. "Mr. Cole, can you provide full copies of what you've gathered? Original resolution photos, message threads, that timeline you built? You can have everything," I said. "I'll label it clean." I spent an hour at the kitchen table building the file set like a foreman, laying out tools, photos, Riverside with the timestamps burned in, texts, Brennan, Monet, trimmed of bedroom trash, leaving logistics and money talk, receipts, hotels, restaurants, drivers, timeline, calls, entries, exits. I zipped it all, backed it up to the cloud, dropped a hard copy on an encrypted drive. When I hit send to her secure inbox, I felt something I hadn't felt since this started. Footing. By evening I was at Booker's. The TV in the corner had Brennan's office in B-roll, while Len refilled my glass without asking. "Do what lets you sleep," he said, eyes on me instead of the news. "Not what wins you applause." That's when Tanisha slid in hot, perfume first, voice louder than the jukebox. "You happy now, ya? You did this? You dragged her name through the dirt. You couldn't just let it be private?" I turned on my stool. I didn't drag anything. I told the truth to the person who deserved it. I nodded at her phone clenched white in her hand. "If you're worried about Monet, call a clinic, a counsellor, a doctor. Don't call me to fix a fire she lit." She blinked, mouth open, then shut leg at a car that won't turn over. Even the old heads at the back table stopped pretending they weren't listening. The room didn't cheer, it just settled. Folks pick sides quick, but they pick facts quicker. And facts were walking around now with court stamps on their shoes. Out on the street, I saw Monet for the first time without all that armour. Red eyes, hands twisting her keys while she talked to Miss Eloise. The block took her in with a new look, less gossip, more gravity. And me? For once, when people quoted what I said, it didn't sound like anger. It sounded like boundaries, not revenge. Just a line I wouldn't let them cross anymore. My phone buzzed. Marl. You see this? Before I could type, I heard it. The long, thin wail rolling in from downtown. Sirens threading the dusk. One, then two, then the layered chorus that says somebody's chapter is ending the hard way. I stepped outside. The air tasted like rain and metal. From this far, you couldn't tell if they were headed to Brennan's glossy loft or somewhere nearby, only that they were closing fast. Across the street, Miss Eloise tightened her scarf and watched the lights bloom against the buildings. Well, she murmured, mostly to herself, math finally due. I didn't answer. I just listened to the sirens grow, each note sharper than the last, and wondered who they'd stop for first. The block had seen a lot of noise in its time, but nothing like the scene outside Brennan March's loft when the cruisers pulled up. Sirens cut through the afternoon, lights throwing red and blue across the clean brick like warning paint. Neighbours leaned out of windows, phones high, narrating like it was Sunday's sermon. The detectives came first, then the uniforms. Brennan tried to talk slick, but his voice cracked. Fraud, misuse of funds. The words carried through the air like nails hitting concrete. They cuffed him slow, deliberate, making sure everybody saw. He shouted about business rivals and setups, but no one was buying it. Not after the paper trail, not after the recordings. Handcuffs don't teach humility. They just turn volume knobs up. He was cursing louder than he ever smiled. By sundown, the warrants had spread. A knock at Moni's door brought her a different kind of paper, summons for questioning, with charges listed neat. Complicity, receipt of misappropriated funds. She tried to brush it off, saying it was just gifts, but receipts don't bend. They stay flat, permanent. Even Nesh caught some fire. The investigators called it aiding and abetting. She called it being a friend. Either way, her name went on the paperwork. That shook her more than anything I could have said. And in the middle of it, when the street felt like a stage, Miss Eloise showed up at my kitchen door with a covered plate. Fried catfish, collards, cornbread, still warm, and she set it on the table like the world wasn't burning and said plain, "Don't be glad they're hurting, baby. Be glad you got your quiet back." It landed heavier than Brennan's shouting or Monet's excuses. I sat with that food, not tasting much, but letting the smell of home steady me. For the first time since all this began, I didn't feel triumph or revenge or heat in my chest. I felt quiet. Outside, the gossip was running, the block was lit up with theories and laughs. But inside, in my own house, it was still. I caught myself whispering the question that had been waiting since day one, the one I'd been ducking behind all the anger. What now, Jar? You ain't vengeance. Your work boots, a steady hand, a light on in the shop. You're the one who keeps the roof standing. And maybe it was time I remembered that. The weeks after the sirens blurred together in a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Lawyers' offices, paperwork, signatures on lines that cut the past clean. My attorney handled the divorce without drama, no shouting, no courtroom spectacle, just steady steps toward a future I could shape with my own hands, the house, the shop, the accounts, all back under my name, all mine to rebuild. I poured myself into the work again. Not to hide, not to numb, but because I wanted to. Framing, wiring, sanding, every nail set true was like putting a bone back where it belonged. By the time the last coat of paint dried in the kitchen, the place finally looked like my home, not a stage set for someone else's performance. One afternoon, I ran into Jean outside the courthouse. She looked tired but clear-eyed, her lawyer at her side, papers tucked into her bag like a finished chapter. She stopped me with a hand on my arm. "Thank you," she said simply, "for not dragging it through the mud, for keeping it about the truth." I nodded. No speech needed. Sometimes the cleanest thanks is just that, short, plain, real. The first Sunday after the papers came through, I walked into Mount Olive Baptist for the first time in too long. The pews creaked familiar, the choir hummed low, and Pastor Ronnie stood at the pulpit with that fire only he had. His sermon was about truth, how it can heal or poison, depending on whether you pour it with love or with venom. "Speak truth without the toxin," he said, voice carrying to the rafters, because truth with no grace is just another weapon. I sat there, hands folded, feeling those words cut and stitch at the same time. I'd spoken plenty of truth lately, but grace, that was the part I needed to learn again. Back home, I started reclaiming the little rituals I'd abandoned. Cooking, not for anniversaries or performance, but because I like the smell of garlic in my own kitchen. Music on the old stereo, vinyl spinning slow, blues humming low under the rafters. Even the act of setting a table for one felt steady, honest. It was mine, and that was enough. The house was quiet when the knock came. 3 slow taps on the door. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My chest tightened, not with anger, not even with dread, just that electric stillness when the past comes calling. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked toward the door. On the floor was a folded note slid under the crack, my name scrawled in handwriting I knew better than my own. It was from Monet, and I stood there, hand on the knob, the question hanging heavier than any gavel, any sermon. Would I open it? The note sat on the counter all night, folded once, edges curled from her hand. I never opened it. Didn't need to. I already knew the words. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Take me back. The same script recycled too many times. This time I let silence be my answer. Instead, I poured myself a glass of bourbon, let the ice settle with a quiet crack, and raised it in the empty kitchen. Here's to lessons, I said out loud, steady and clear. Not the wounds, the lessons. The skillet hissed behind me. Onions softening in butter, filling the air with something warm. Windows open, spring night drifting through, the house finally felt alive again. Not haunted, not heavy, just breathing. And here's where I turn to you, listening on the other side of this mic, or watching through the lens. Don't mistake quiet for weakness. Don't confuse noise with love. Set your boundaries, hold them like brick. And when you love, love with honesty, because anything else ain't love at all, it's theatre. Later that week, Miss Eloise slid an envelope under my door. Inside was an old Polaroid, edges faded, colours washed, but still bright enough to see. It was my block in the early 90s. Kids on bikes, men on porches, women laughing by the stoop. The house survives everything, her note read, and I believed her. This place had seen it all and kept standing. So would I. The camera, if you were here, would catch me sitting at the same table where it all started. No candles now, no staged romance, just light from the open window, steady and true. Candles can be blown out, but the light you carry, the kind that grows back after ashes, you don't snuff that out. My phone buzzed on the counter. Detective Morton's name lit the screen. "New case," she said in her message. "Different faces, different lies. Could use that eye of yours for receipts, Mr. Cole." I looked out the window, glass still in my hand, skillet still hissing low. Maybe the story wasn't done. Maybe I wasn't just a man who lost a wife. I was a man who learned how to follow the truth no matter how ugly the trail. The bourbon burned smooth on the way down. "Candles can be blown out," I repeated softly, more to myself than anyone else. "But light don't die." And then the line went quiet. Just the sound of the house breathing, waiting for what came next.